Thanks for an opportunity to come and spend some time with the team. You know, it's all about partnerships. I think one of the things I've learned in my 2.5 years in this particular command is we can't do everything ourselves from up at Fort Meade. And I'll talk a little bit about that. A little bit about myself. I did start as a SIGINTer. I was a Czech linguist along the Iron Curtain back in the early 80s. Have spent about 34 years in the business as an electronic warfare and signals intelligence analyst. I have found myself, though, in the last 10 years working to help figure out how we build what cyber capacity looks like in the Army, and then some leadership up at the Joint Command up at Fort Meade. What I'm going to try and give you today is a little bit just a view from where I sit and what might be different from the senior enlisted perspective by some of the others. So I asked that you couch it from that perspective, that I do provide a particular view for the boss, and that's what my primary task is. First thing I'd tell you is it's really easy to become intimidated by the technology. You know, the technology part is a key piece of what we do in cyberspace, but it really is added together with this human dimension, and I'm going to describe some of what I'm seeing with the humans and with the individual workers in this particular space. Cyber's an operational domain, just like the others, air, sea, space, land. It's this notion that you have many of the same characteristics. Maneuver, C2, fires, we have key terrain, and there are lots of processes within the service that can be used to take advantage of how to operate in this particular domain. I often find that folks try and establish something new, this notion that cyber's new, cyber's special, so we have to invent some new method to do that. The services that are the most effective working in the space, from Dave Redmon's estimation, are those that take their existing processes and apply those to this particular domain. It doesn't exist, though, in and of itself. It's not cyber for cyber's sake. You know, sometimes the best thing you can do to go after a cyber adversary is to drop a big bomb on them, or vice versa. How do we work through and provide that capacity and capability for the nation? This view of non-kinetic effects and how that can be synchronized for a greater whole. Last year, January, the SecDef came and I think really laid the carpet for us that said, hey, Cyber Command, it's time to achieve some effect for commanders. And what we have learned working with our CENTCOM and SOCOM partners in theater really is that there is value on bringing cyber to bear as part of the greater effort. Timing and tempo synchronized by our geographic partners, but still bringing a unique capability. Part of my experience over the years has been, how do you take a very technical skill and bring that to an organization and provide capabilities for commanders. If there's one thing I've learned working for Admiral Rogers, it's about outcomes. You can't achieve an outcome, then there's absolutely no reason to come to the party. Part of my observation, or even a little bit of frustration over the past couple of years, is where policy is that allows us to perform and conduct operations in this particular space. It's not unlike some of our kinetic effects that have strategic implications. Much of the authority to do things is kept at a fairly high national level within our government. 5 to 10 years from now, what's the perfect vision? That we've got the ability to push cyber capabilities down into the operational and tactical space. It doesn't come just by describing it. I think our way and path forward to be able to get there is to demonstrate, one, that we can operate with discipline, that we can demonstrate that we bring value to the warfighter, and then the rest of the things with policy will come over time. It's someplace we need to get to. I think we're all frustrated with where we are at this particular point, but together in partnership, both within the government, within academia, within the private sector, we should be able to move in that particular direction. So where are we with our cyber mission force? The cyber mission force, as it was designed 7 years ago, was 133 teams, 6,187 great Americans who come together. It's about 80% military, 20% civilian. All of those teams are at IOC. The vast majority are at full full operating capability at this point. We have a few teams that we have to finish to meet our commitment to the nation by the end of the fiscal year in September of next year. Within that particular space, 21 of those comprise our national mission force. That's our ability to go after other cyber actors and other defense of the nation capabilities. And some of this is also an on-order mission to help protect against critical infrastructure. There are 16 areas and sectors that have been identified by the government as critical, and we work as part of our Defend the Nation team to be able to provide support. We have 44 combat mission forces. Over the last 6-7 years, they have been aligned against the geographic combatant commands and the functional combatant commands, parceled out there to be able to provide capabilities to each of them. And then the last is our 68 cyber protection teams, which provide a defensive capability. We have a great partnership with DISA and some cyber protection teams that are out there working defense of the network. 3 primary missions for the command, a little bit of a primer. The first mission of the command is to be able to defend our systems. And it's all of our mission systems, not just our networks. I think if you ask my boss at this point how we're doing with networks, you'd get a better grade than where we are with mission and mission command systems at this particular point. If you look at how we've built many of the systems out there to provide command and control between a weapon system and a ground station, we built it on security at the end. So each of our service cyber components is working hard within their services to be able to come and tailor some solutions, prioritize where we need to put effort to be able to shore up our mission systems. And then the third capability is to provide capabilities for our joint commanders, both offense and defense around the world. The workforce, these are absolutely great Americans who are just like their other soldiers, sailor, airmen, and Marines. They come to be part of something bigger than themselves. I think they see themselves as the digital warriors of the 21st century. This notion that they are part of the future of warfare. They're on the cutting edge. They're leading some of our technology advancements in practical application around the world. But fundamentally, they're great service members. They came to do something better. This notion that we always need to just find our IT folks, roll them into the workforce and say, that's our solution. I'm very proud of the Army. The Army for generations has been about taking an American kid off the street with an aptitude, inculcating a skill in them, allowing them an opportunity to apply that skill on behalf of the nation. And then at some point, we return them back to America better than we found them. It's diversity, though, in this space. There's a lot of push to try and figure out what a cyber worker looks like. For me, that cyber worker is someone that has a strong curiosity, is a problem solver, strong ethics, and can understand risks. Some of our best operators were Air Force bomb loaders. Some of our best operators were infantrymen. Some of our best operators, both offense and defense, were comms guys or intel folks. You kind of get the message. It's about this notion of why are we restricting our ability to find the right talent? Our adversaries aren't. So how do we find an aptitude and put it to work for the nation? I spent some time with the team over at IBM a couple of conferences ago and ran into this fella, Mark Zadelhoff, over in their security office. And he described these as new-collar jobs. And here's what he said. New-collar jobs are those that prioritize skills, knowledge, and willingness to learn over degrees in the career fields that gave people their initial work experience. That can't be said lightly. The talent to work in this space, and these kids are absolutely phenomenal. So as you work around, help us find the talent in your communities, within corporate America, folks that are ready for another opportunity to go and work in the workspace on the government side. It's about this diversity of talent that's going to work. So, Colonel Hall and I spent a lot of time talking about, what are the people that need to work in this particular space? And I would ask that you think about diversity, everyone bringing a different skill, whether it's someone who was an accountant before or someone who came from a technical side of the comm community. There's absolutely value to provide that perspective. For the Army, it's about having a warfighter ethos and a warfighter culture. There is a so what to cyberspace. And if it just becomes this notion of making the box do something, high-fiving when you achieve some effect against a piece of equipment, the next question should be, so what? What is the adversary doing next? So being able to build and develop leaders who understand, who have the ability to see value and to build it into the operations is absolutely essential. Partnerships. United States Cyber Command has an element out in Silicon Valley called the point of partnership. We work it primarily staffed by reserve officers, but it's co-located with DIUX in the Silicon Valley to be able to provide some linkages and try and help move partnerships from just being a transactional relationship. I'm going to do this for this reason and this for that one. My crystal ball sees a time when we have integrated operation centers, especially if we're going to work in this space for critical infrastructure. Critical infrastructure is not maintained just by government entities anymore. Everywhere I get in the utility or the power sector or out in the finance industry, it's all commercial. It's all corporate entities. So how do we work through when we have a particular challenge to share a common view of the adversary, share TTPs on how they're going after our particular interests? How do we work and synchronize those activities? It's not when Cyber Command gets the call to say, hey, it's time, you just got your on-order mission to go and defend critical infrastructure. If we don't rehearse it, if we don't spend time practicing how we're going to do that, we're not going to solve this particular solution. At one of our Cyber Guard or Cyber Flag exercises down in Suffolk, it was a partnership event where we were working through some training with the utility sector, with some National Guardsmen and some Cyber Command teammates. And it was fascinating that the very first part of the discussion really was about proprietary information. And I remember watching a bunch of soldiers sign non-disclosure agreements that they wouldn't give away what was on those particular systems in that industry. That's a kind of flippant thing that had to occur. But how do we get to the point where we can do that more routinely, where there's some comfort and confidence that we're going to work through that? It's this notion that we all have to be disciplined, we all have to be ethical in the space, or we don't build the trust that allows us then to be able to work across that scene. So from corporate America, especially within those 16 critical infrastructure areas, we have to spend deliberate time together figuring out what our common interests are, because partnerships are one that has value for both sides. If it is just a value on a one-way sound from the government that says, hey, we need this, then that's not a partnership. This is that transactional part of the relationship, and we have to get past that. So what is it that I think we've been asking for? From my perspective as the senior enlisted leader, I really am looking for greater machine learning. Much of what we do in this space is all focused on known behaviors. We capture what we've seen an adversary doing, we build a particular signature or thing against that, and then a whole set of rules are applied that allow us to identify, hey, yes, we have seen that before. The reason I think we need machine learning at speed is I need to free up some of this very high demand, low density human capital that exists. When you go and spend time down in the teams, they are spending a lot of time doing tasks over and over again, knowing that all it takes is an automated solution to help us solve that particular problem. That'll allow us to harness their potential and capability in better ways against some critical things where we need a human in the loop. What are the buzzwords? Defensibility, redundancy, reliability. I went and read the NIST standards to get a sense of what is it, it's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. They're all buzzwords, but they really are what are the foundation of cybersecurity. So all of those other providers of other weapon systems that are around these 5 halls this particular week all have to take a look at what does that mean from protecting their connectivity, protecting their networks, and the critical things that tie all of those elements together. Tactical employment, the Army's working really hard. I'm pretty proud of the Army over the last really 5 years that I've been doing this, since we stood up the 780th on the offensive side when I was part of INSCOM. The Army put money, the Army put resource against a problem in the way that we do as a service, and I think we've made great strides and are leading the way in many of the areas that U.S. Cyber Command has equities in. Not to say that the other services aren't within their service constructs moving forward at a rapid pace as well, but I think if I were to say what does the Army do well, it really is massing effort on a particular problem, and something that we should be proud of. I was listening to a thing on YouTube between Admiral Rogers and Admiral Stavridis out in San Diego a couple of weeks ago. And he got asked the question I get asked quite frequently, is this notion of electronic warfare and cyber convergence. I started when EW was converged with signals intelligence, this notion that, you would do some collection for a while under the G2, then you would transfer operationally under the 3, achieve some effect, some attack, and then you'd switch back under intel control again to do battle damage assessment. So in my mind, EW and this notion of the electromagnetic spectrum is essential as we take a look into the future. How much of what we need to do in cyberspace is the access through the spectrum? A great portion of it, as you see with operations around the world. So intellectually, I heard the boss say that we absolutely know that that's what would be really good for the nation, that at some point this is what we need to do. It comes down to a timing issue for us at US Cyber Command. Should EW and cyber converge and someone be in charge of all of that? Absolutely. We are, though, working with a high demand, low density workforce. The capability and capacity we put to work the moment that it exists. Name another weapon system or another program where the moment that it works part of the way, you put it right to work to do something for the nation. It's great for learning and becoming more dynamic, but how do you then recharge, work through, retrain, and build upon that next one? So do we see a day, do I see a day when we have greater convergence between EO, cyber, EW? Absolutely. It's just a matter of what's the right timing. The Army's putting a lot of work into that. I listened to the Cyber Center of Excellence, or General Frost and the team up there in G357, and it's what's this notion of CMO? What is the convergence that we need to do? And it's more than just a grand scale. I think the team out at the Intel Center of Excellence is helping us work really hard to figure out what are the systems we need to be able to have that take us from being able to collect, achieve some operational effect, and synchronize it with the rest of the operations. So I hope, long after or shortly after I'm gone, that we'll find the right path to do that. The other things that pop up, what keeps the team up at night? So the human domain, human dimension part of this isn't just reserved for the cyber mission force. We need to have a greater discussion across all of the services of what does cyber mean for every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, and Coast Guardsman out there in the force. What does it mean to have discipline in cyberspace? You take a look at the news over the past few weeks and notification of some of our Bluetooth vulnerabilities that exist on mobile platforms. How well can that be used by the adversary to help map our activities? There was some reporting in the news on our folks doing operations and training in Europe. and what the adversary is doing by taking a look just at what our service members have in their hands. So what does discipline look like in this space? Phishing attacks still make up a large number of vulnerability access points for us as a department. How do we work through, with defense in depth, we can keep a bunch of that well beyond the soldier level. But in the end, defense in depth from our tier 1 at our entry points into our network, through the services, through the camps, posts, and stations in tier 3, still ends up with a user who sits there and clicks on that link in that email, or now because we've disabled some of that, cut and paste that link into a browser to still go out there and provide a nice access point for the adversary. We've got to solve at the basic training level and all of the services, what's that minimum level of cyber hygiene, for lack of a better word, on how we look forward to the future. I mentioned that part of the worry is mission systems, vice networks. That's just a drumbeat that we just need to keep iterating over and over again. The solution is with our ASALT teammates and our ability to work through. What does every new contract in your command look like? What are the requirements for who owns the data, who owns the system, who has inspection requirements? When cybersecurity is built into that particular project, you as the leaders in the cyber defense world are those that are going to help us get to that particular point. Support to critical infrastructure without rehearsal. I'll say it a second time. Can't be at the time that Sony gives the phone call that says, hey, I need to work through this particular problem. Or we're in the middle of a hurricane and all of a sudden there's some kind of intrusion into one of our systems. We've got to rehearse. We've got to think through all the what if. Admiral Rogers said it in this interview, it's more than just tabletop exercises. We've got to come together in collaborative environments to solve the problem. How about integrity of data? Can you trust the data that you see? As our adversaries get more complex and spend more and more time trying to defeat us, what happens when you start to distrust information? You can look at the whole fake news discussion, but take that a step further. What is it when you log into your mission command system, you're looking at a blue or red picture, and you no longer have faith that that's the actual picture? What are the methods that allow us to have the right redundancies and the right visibility of integrity of our data? Another thing our service components are helping us do is looking at all of the places that we store data, both across the department and then within the individual services. OPM's a good indicator for everybody. You look at Equifax. Many of you get your money through DFAS. What are those things that we're doing to make sure that those systems and networks are where they need to be? And the services have the primary lead, in my mind, for those that fall within their particular constructs. And then as we look at joint systems, one of our service components are helping us solve that. So ownership of the problem. Part of my job for the boss is to spend time with our combatant command partners and others externally. And the most telling thing for me, and this is Dave Redmon talking, is when I will go into an organization to have a cyber discussion, I'll instantly know who owns cyber, who owns mission assurance platforms in their command. If I'm quickly shuttled into the J6 office, or if I'm pushed into the J6, or I'm pushed into the J3, the Sergeant Major has an instant view of how much the command takes ownership of their platforms. It's a great indicator. The boss, he'll go into the commander's office. But when I make my visits, and then I'll go back and tell Admiral Rogers, we need to work through helping Organization X bring all of the folks together. It is a 2, 3, and 6 effort, led by a commander with ownership that it's absolutely important that we be able to move and communicate across the space. So in closing, thanks for an opportunity to partner. Many of you are familiar faces. Some of my predecessors are in the group. Some of my relatives are in the group, which is pretty cool. But as I move on to my next adventure, it's my last opportunity to say thank you. Thank you for the privilege of being able to lead a bunch of great Americans in a task that's pretty cool. You know, I spent most of my time in divisions. That's where I found my home. In the end, I realized it's about providing a capability to a commander so that some decision can be made. That's why we wear the uniform. You know, if the goal is we want to do high-end things like some of our other agency partners, of which I'm also the NSA Sergeant Major, then, you know, maybe we can do that with an all-civilian force. So I would ask you to take a look at what you think the uniform part of this is. What are the Title 10 things that really allow us to do some cool things on behalf of the nation? Because that's what those service members are out there doing each and every day. They're very, very proud to serve you. I look forward to pushing them out into your tactical formations to gain some warfighter experience so I can yank them right back to do even better and better things within the command. So thank you, Joe and Amanda and team, for a great opportunity. Thank you.